Welcome to Reflecting Light. This podcast is about filling the world with light by exploring myth, ancient texts, scripture, great works of world literature, and the works of artists, past and present, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And now, here is your host, Mandy Green.
Hello and welcome to Reflecting Light. I'm your host, Mandy Green. It's wonderful to be with you. Spring is springing and life is coming back into the world. As I say that, I absolutely feel the weight and the heaviness of the events transpiring globally. And here's my small effort. Today's podcast is about the Snow Queen. Now, this amazing tale by Hans Christian Andersen was brought to my attention by an Instagram account called Forgotten Feminine, if you'd like to follow her. She had a wonderful series of posts about this, and I wanted to share part of it with you because it is so relevant to our day that it's ridiculous. I never tire of hearing stories. In fact, to fall asleep every night, I have to listen to an Audible book because I just need to hear someone telling me a story. So if you're like me and you still want to curl up on your kindergarten rug after you had milk and cookies and hear a story, then this is the podcast you'll enjoy. I'm going to read directly from the book, The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, translated by Naomi Lewis. And I just want to share with you part the first. Listen now, we're going to begin our story. When we come to the end of it, we shall know more than we do now. There was once a wicked imp, a demon, one of the very worst. He was the devil himself. One day there he was, laughing his head off. Why? Because he had made a magic mirror with a special power. Everything good and beautiful that was reflected in it shriveled up almost to nothing. But everything evil and ugly seemed even larger and more hideous than it was. In this glass, the loveliest landscapes looked just like boiled spinach. And even the nicest people appeared quite horrible, or seemed to be standing on their heads, or to have no trunks to their bodies. As for their faces, they were so twisted and changed that no one could have recognized them. And if anything holy or serious passed through someone's mind, a hideous sneering grin was shown in the glass. This was a huge joke. All the students who attended his demon school went around declaring that he'd achieved a miracle. Now everyone could see what the world and its humans were really like. They took the mirror and ran around to the four corners of the earth until there wasn't a place or a person unharmed by the glass. At last, they fixed on a still more daring plan to fly up to heaven and to make fun of the angels and of God himself. The higher they flew with the mirror, the more it grimaced and twisted. They could scarcely hold on to it. Up and up they went, nearer and nearer to the heaven's kingdom until disaster. The mirror shook so violently with its weird reflections that it sprang out of their hands and went crashing down to the earth, where it burst into hundreds of millions, billions, trillions of tiny pieces. And that made matters even worse than before. For some of these pieces were hardly as big as a grain of sand. These flew here and there all through the wide world. Whoever got a speck in his eye saw everything good as bad or twisted. For every little splinter had the same power that the whole glass had. Some people even caught a splinter in their hearts, and that was horrible, for their hearts became just like lumps of ice. Some of the pieces were so big that they were used as window panes, but it didn't do to look at your friends through them. Other pieces were made into spectacles. Imagine! The demon laughed till he nearly split his sides. And as we tell this story, little splinters of magic glass are still flying about in the air. Listen, you shall hear what happened to some of them. Well, my dear friends, if that's not a tale for our time, I don't know what is. The splinters have hit the ground. They're everywhere. They are everywhere. They show up in all of the reflections, in all of the lenses, in all of the places you get information. It's all been hit by these splinters of glass. We read in the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, verse 20, "Woe or alas to those who call evil good and put darkness for light and make bitterness sweet and sweet bitter." Now, the Hebrew here is really interesting because those who speak evil to be good, we see this rampantly everywhere, don't we? The gifted spin doctors who use their lenses and their mirrors to reflect a different reality than what really is, or that things that are truly good are passed off as not good, or things that are really quite diabolical have been painted over and made to look lovely. Woe unto them, and those who set darkness for light and light for darkness. Now, this Hebrew word tsum means to place or set or establish or direct toward a fixed point. Well, whatever you fix your sight on, that will be your direction. And so it's important that as you go through this whirlwind, this craziness of everything that's coming at us right now, that you look to the point you want to look to. I love the story of Peter as he's walking across the water. I actually hate how we tell it when we tell it because we're like, oh, he fell. Name me one other person who has walked on the water besides Jesus Christ. Exactly. The amazing audacity and tenacity of Peter is something to be admired. And as he walked across that water, his eyes were fixed on the Lord. Now, I served a mission in Russia. I'm very cognizant of what's going on in our world. And I guarantee you, my friends, that everyone in Russia has family in Ukraine, and everyone in Ukraine has family in Russia. But there's a wonderful word, sosredotochovать, in Russian, which means to focus, laser focus on the point right in the middle. And that's what it requires for us to navigate very turbulent, tempestuous seas and times like these. And I love that word. And so it's important to see what your eye is being fixed on. It's important to see and be cognizant of what your eye is fixed on. What are the fountains that you are drinking from? What are the fountains you are drinking from? Do they help focus you on the light and on the Lord and on His power to bless and to heal? If not, perhaps we could all sosredotochovать a little bit more and be cognizant and diligent in our daily efforts to refocus, to re-look at that point. And the last part, those who make bitterness sweet and sweet bitter. Well, there you have it. If you say it enough times, is it believable? If you put it on enough places, is it believable? If you skewer the picture or the image just like happened in the glass, does it look sweet or bitter when it's actually the reverse? The Snow Queen is relevant to our times. The author Neil Gaiman said, "Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." Now, what's really interesting is that our translation of the book of Revelations talks about the great dragon. Well, the better translation in Greek is the serpent. And if you go back from the last book in the Bible to the first book in the Bible, where we learn about the great serpent and his tremendous ability to deceive, to distort, to play on certain events to get an outcome that he was going for. His forte is deception. His forte is reframing something so that you will look at it a certain way. We need to be careful about what is coming into our minds, into our hearts. I've been very conscious of this week as I've been preparing for the podcast. And it's so amazing to me, truly amazing to me, how many negative thoughts flood my heart and my mind and my soul on the daily. And every time I think of something negative, there's a little voice saying, maybe you need to reframe that, Mandy. Maybe you need to seek and pray for greater discernment and light, and to reframe it, to look for what is truly good, to look for what is truly light, and to prize that which is truly sweet. Now, that's not to say that the darkness is not raging and existing, and evil is not raging, and bitter is not part of this mortal journey. We'll talk about that more next week when I talk about Passover. It's really important that we understand some of the symbolism of the bitter cup. And I'm not saying anything that would make it less bitter, only its essential quality to the mortal experience. And so as you go about your week and you go about your days, think of the pieces of the mirror that have gotten into your heart and into your vision. And when you want to just frame something negatively or assign it qualities and attributes, perhaps you can reflect on the Snow Queen. Perhaps you can reflect on all the shards and the mirror dust that's floating through our world still, and make a choice that would lead you to the source of love and light. Not a super long message this week, but a powerful one. So the song for this week, as I was driving around, I heard Radio Gaga by Queen, and I'm going to include the Live Aid version, which is amazing. But as I was listening to it, of course, it was talking about radio disappearing and how we are so caught up in the visual. But what I love about this song, it inspires me to take my place, to not be part of someone else's plot or someone else's storyline, that you get to choose it. You get to choose where you're going, what you're listening to, and how you're influenced. Let me just quote the words of the chorus. So don't become some background noise, a backdrop for the girls and boys who just don't know and just don't care and just complain when you're not there. You had your time. You had the power. You've yet to find your finest hour. All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio Goo Goo, Radio Gaga, Radio What's New. We watch the shows. We watch the stars on videos for hours and hours. We hardly need to use our ears. How music changes through the years. Now, music, if you think about it in a broader, more symbolic sense, have we lost the holy music and it's drowned out by all of this noise and all of the visual? Well, my friends, you do have time. You do have power. And I believe we all have yet to have our finest hour, but it becomes dependent on our focus, on the fountains we drink from, and the place we put our heart. and straining out all of this mirror image that we're getting, all of this interference. It is hard, and I hear you. I am with you in the storm. And my prayer, as always this week, is that you will be able to discern between good and evil, that you will see the difference between darkness and light, and that you will understand what is truly sweet and truly bitter. And as we walk through this bitter road, we remember the one who drank the bitter cup on our behalf so that we would be able to overcome this, survive it somehow. I know that He is the answer. I don't know how that shows up for you in your life, but I know that He is the answer. And as we approach these sacred days prior to Easter, I pray that your focus will zone in, that you'll start to be cognizant of all of the things at play in your life, and you will look to the one true fountain, the one true source of light and love and living water. That is the podcast today for my friends. Sending you as much as I can this divine love and His beautiful reflected light.
Thank you for joining us for Reflecting Light with Mandy Green. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a good rating and share it with your friends. And remember, your light makes the world a brighter place. Share it.